My name is Elena. I am 26 years old. I work in corporate finance, and on a Saturday evening in November, I walked into my father's dining room knowing exactly what was going to happen and choosing to walk in anyway. What I did not tell him, what I had not told anyone in that house, was that I was the person who would be deciding whether his company survived the week. He found that out over dinner. I will get to that. Let me explain how I got there, because the story does not make sense without the years that came before it. My father, Marcus, had built his money the way certain men build it, loudly, in full view of everyone, with a particular care for the impression it made. The house was large. The dining room had high ceilings and heavy furniture, and a table that seated 14 people. The art on the walls had been chosen by someone else and paid for as a statement. When my father walked through a room, he walked through it as if the room was grateful for his presence. I had grown up in that house. I had eaten at that table. I had learned by the time I was 12 that my father's love was conditional in the way that money is conditional. It was available when you performed correctly and withdrawn when you did not. I had spent most of my childhood not performing correctly by his standards. My grades were good, but not the right kind of good. My choices were careful, but not the choices he would have made. My career, when I built one, was not built through him or because of him, which was the thing he found most difficult to accept. I had gone to university, studied finance, graduated, and walked into a career that had nothing to do with his world, or his introductions, or his name. He had never forgiven me for that. My sister, Layla, had taken a different path. She had stayed close to home, stayed close to him, and learned to perform in the ways he rewarded. She drove the right car, she attended the right events, she laughed at the right moments. At family dinners, she would photograph the table settings and the food and the imported statues in the hallway and post with captions about the life their family had built. She had become, over the years, a reliable mirror for my father's sense of himself. The two of them together were a closed system. I had been outside it for a long time and had stopped feeling the cold. What neither of them knew was what I had been doing in the 3 years since I had last sat at that table. My firm specialized in corporate debt restructuring. We were brought in when companies were struggling, when the numbers had stopped working and the people running the business either could not see it or refused to. My job was to look at what was actually there, separate it from the story the management had been telling themselves, and assess what, if anything, could be salvaged. 6 months before that Saturday dinner, my firm had been approached by the bank holding a significant portion of my father's company's debt. The company had been struggling for longer than anyone outside had understood. The debt had been restructured once, then extended again. The bank had run out of patience. They had sold the debt portfolio to a specialist firm, the firm where I worked. I had not sought this out. The file came across my desk the way files do, assigned, not chosen. It was only when I opened it and read the company name that I understood what I was looking at. I had spent a week deciding whether to recuse myself. I had spoken to our legal team. I had considered the options carefully. In the end, I had concluded that recusing myself on the basis of a family relationship that was, in practical terms, non-existent, would have been giving that relationship more credit than it deserved. I was the most qualified person on the team to assess this file. I assessed it. The assessment was not good. The company had significant liabilities, poor management decisions over the preceding 4 years, and a pattern of spending that had prioritized appearance over sustainability. The charitable gala my sister had mentioned at dinner, the kind of event my father used to maintain his social profile, had been funded from company accounts in ways that would not survive scrutiny. I had done the analysis. I had documented my findings. I had prepared my recommendation. Then I had received the call that my father expected me at dinner, something about a family obligation he felt I had been neglecting. I had agreed to come, not for him, because our lawyer Adrian had advised me that the formal notification of the debt decision needed to be delivered in person, and that this weekend was the appropriate window. I had decided to fulfill both obligations at once. The dinner began in the way these dinners always began. My father at the head of the table, Layla beside him, phone already in hand, ready to document the evening for her social media. Guests I half recognized from previous occasions, associates of my father's, people who attended his events and reflected his importance back to him. I arrived on time. I sat down. I placed my bag beside my chair. What happened next was so quick and so deliberate that for a moment I simply sat with it. My father stood. He looked directly at me. He said, "I do not share a table with useless people." He pulled my chair away from the table as he said it. The room went quiet, and then, from somewhere, there was muffled laughter. I heard it the way you hear something unreal, at a remove, as if it were happening to someone else. Layla had her phone raised. She was recording. I straightened. I looked at my father. I kept my voice entirely level. I said, "You just made a very expensive mistake." He did not understand what I meant. He gestured for wine. The conversation resumed around him. I stood near the window and waited. I want to pause here, because standing at the edge of a room where your father has just humiliated you in front of a table of people who laughed, while your sister records it on her phone, while you are carrying the document in your jacket that ends his company's access to the funds it needs to survive, is not a simple thing to hold. I had been preparing for this meeting for 6 months. I had done the analysis. I was certain of my recommendation. I was professionally composed. And I was also 26 years old, and that was still my father, and the laughter had still landed. I stood at the window and I looked at my phone, and I waited for Adrian. If you have ever had to stay composed in a room that was trying to diminish you, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what happened when Adrian walked through that door is the part that changed everything in that dining room. Adrian arrived at 8:15. He was our legal representative, precise, experienced, and very good at entering a room without announcing that something significant was about to happen. He placed his documents on the table quietly. He told my father that the bank had declined the extension. He said the debt had been sold and that the new holder required a formal evaluation before any further funding could be released. My father picked up his pen immediately. He asked where to sign. Adrian hesitated. He said, "The decision on the evaluation rests with the acquiring firm's lead assessor." My father looked around the table. He asked who that was. He said it in the tone of a man who expected the answer to be someone he could manage. Adrian looked toward me. I stepped away from the window. I walked to the table. My father looked at me with an expression I had not seen on him before. Not anger, not contempt, but something closer to confusion, as if I were a variable he had not accounted for. I said, "You do not need to call anyone. I am the one making this decision." Layla laughed. She said, "You?" I reached into my jacket and placed the certificate of authority on the table, the seal of the firm, the formal documentation of my role in the assessment, my name on the front. My father picked it up. I watched him read it. I watched his face change. He set it down. He looked at me. He said, "Approve the funds. You are my daughter." I kept my voice steady. I said, "Based on a review of the company's financial records, management decisions over the preceding 4 years, and conduct observed this evening, the application is denied." The room was silent in a way it had not been silent before. I cited the specific findings, the mismanagement, the pattern of spending that had prioritized appearance over sustainability, the company account usage that would not survive formal scrutiny. I was brief and I was precise, and I did not raise my voice once. Turning to my father, her composure cracked for the first time. She said this was his fault. He had handled the finances. She had trusted him. He said nothing. I turned to Adrian. I told him to suspend all pending applications and initiate the formal recovery process. He nodded. He began packing his documents. At 9 o'clock, I put on my coat. My father stood. He crossed the room. He put his hand on my arm. He said, "We are family." I removed his hand gently, but completely. I said, "That ended when you called me useless." I walked through the dining room, through the hallway with the imported statues, through the front door. Outside, the night air was cold and very clear. I sat in my car for a moment before I started the engine. My hands were not entirely steady against the wheel. That was all right. Steady hands are for the room. In the car, by myself, I was allowed to feel it. I called my friend Mara. She answered on the second ring and said nothing while I told her what had happened. She did not fill the silence with reassurances. She waited until I was finished, and then she said, "You did what you had to." I believed her, not because those words erased anything, because they were accurate. I drove back toward the city. The road was empty. The lights of the houses thinned out as I put distance between myself and that dining room. At some point, I noticed that the tightness I had been carrying in my chest for 6 months, the particular tension of carrying a decision that had not yet been made, was gone. It had been made. By Monday, the formal bankruptcy filing was complete. The process that followed was administrative and methodical and entirely outside my hands. My role had been the assessment and the decision. What came after was handled by the appropriate parties. I did not follow the proceedings closely. I did not need to. I cut contact with my father and Layla, not in a dramatic final message, simply by not responding, by not returning calls, by allowing the silence to become, gradually, the new state of things. Some people expected me to feel guilty about the decision. A distant relative called to tell me that family should come first. I listened to what she said and thanked her for calling. Then I put the phone down and went back to work. I had reviewed the file. I had done the analysis. I had made the recommendation I would have made for any client. The fact that my father was on the other side of the decision did not change what the numbers said. It had never changed what the numbers said. What it had done was require me to be more careful, more documented, and more certain than I would have needed to be with any other file. I had been all three. I think about that dining room sometimes. I think about the moment my father pulled the chair away and said what he said, and the room laughed. I think about standing at the window with my phone and the debt analysis glowing on the screen and waiting for Adrian. I think about the walk to the table, my heels on the floor, the certificate in my jacket, the particular silence when I placed it on the table and my father read my name. I think about what that room believed about me when I walked in, and I think about what it understood when I walked out. I had not come for revenge. Revenge would have required me to care about their opinion, which would have meant their opinion still held power over me. I did not come for that. I came to fulfill a professional obligation. I did it correctly. I documented everything. I made the call the numbers supported. What my father had built over 40 years of performance and appearance and carefully managed impressions had not survived contact with accurate accounting. That was not something I had done to him. That was something he had done to himself. Here is what that dining room and that Saturday evening taught me. Respect is not something you inherit from the people who raised you. It is not something that comes automatically with a family name or a seat at a particular table. It is something you establish through consistent choices, the kind of choices that do not require an audience, that do not depend on who is watching, that hold their shape whether or not anyone is recording. My father had spent 40 years building the appearance of power, the house, the table, the guests, the performance of authority. He had never understood that the performance and the substance are two different things, and that when the substance is gone, the performance does not hold. I had spent 6 years building something quieter, a skill set, a professional record, a reputation based on the accuracy of my assessments and the integrity of my decisions. Nobody had photographed it. It had not appeared in any social media post. It had simply been there, built one careful decision at a time, waiting for the moment it was needed. On a Saturday evening in November, it was needed. I do not celebrate what happened to my father's company. I accept it as the result of decisions he made over years and chose not to examine. I was not the cause of the collapse. I was simply the person who assessed it accurately and acted on what I found. Walking away from that house was not the end of something. It was the beginning of something quieter and steadier and entirely my own. I did not look back. I did not need to. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She walked in knowing what she carried. She placed it on the table when the moment came. She walked out and did not look back.